Everyone has the right to a standard of living adequate for the health and well-being of himself and of his family. This was Article 25(1) in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. However, today 1.6 billion people are exposed to absolute water scarcity. This is about a fifth of the population. The situation is worse in Africa, where approximately 40% live under these conditions, but water scarcity is found on every continent. Now, this is a direct violation of Article 25(1). The UN forecasts that in 2025, 1/3 of the world's population will be affected by absolute water scarcity, which means 2.8 billion people will be without needed water resources. Now, this is only the absolute water scarcity. Today, there is already 1/3 of the world's population who live under conditions where there is not enough water or the quality of it has been compromised. And by 2025, the number is expected to rise to 2/3 of the world's population. Now, this is a lot of people. And this problem with water scarcity is a problem that will grow larger, a problem that goes against the principles the world has said to be the founding principles for a worthy life. And water scarcity is a problem the world needs to address. Experts also say that water resources may be a future cause to many conflicts, and we already see that tensions arise when who has the right to use which resources is discussed. In ISIS's mission to creating a caliphate in northern Iraq and Syria, taking control over water resources has been extremely important, and a strategy that they have chosen to follow. For instance, controlling both dams of Tigris and Euphrates means having control over 95% of Iraq's water resources. Now, this will immensely affect their agricultural production and essentially their economy. In the same Middle East, North Africa region, where water resources are stressed already, you have several other conflicts. Sharing a Nile, for instance, is a challenge. If any of the other countries overuse the water Nile, Egypt will suffer large consequences of water scarcity. Water can therefore, by some, be used as leverage and ignite conflicts in an already unstable area. Now, this is why I've chosen to speak about this subject. People are suffering, and we also see that water scarcity could be a future cause of conflicts, and it already has started to be a cause of some conflicts around the world. Now, before we take a look at causes and possible solutions to this problem, we have to define what water scarcity is. Water scarcity occurs when any sector's demands for water is higher than the available resources. This includes agriculture, cities, environment, and etc. Now, there are two main types of water scarcity, where the first is physical water scarcity. This is when there is not enough water to meet our needs. Typical places where this occurs are arid regions, and the map you see here shows regions that are exposed to this type of scarcity, where the dark orange are areas where this already occurs, and the light color are places fast approaching this state. Now, the other type of water scarcity is called economic water scarcity. This occurs when financial capital, human capital, and/or institutional capital limits access to water. Even though there is enough water available in nature to cover human needs, the inhabitants do not have access to this water. Now, the places on this map show where this type of water scarcity occurs. We have now established that water scarcity is a problem that both deprives people of the possibility to fulfill their basic needs and could be a cause of conflict, both today but especially in the future when the problem will be more widespread. Now, for us to do something about this, we need to know what is causing this scarcity. We're going to look at 3 possible causes that often come up in discussions about water scarcity: population growth, poor governance, and man-made climate change. Very often, when we discuss water scarcity, we talk about population growth. Over the last century, the world's population has grown from 2 billion to over 7 billion people. Now, more people on the planet means that the fixed amount of water that is available to us must be shared between a larger population. 97.5% of the water on our planet is salt water. Only 2.5% of it is fresh water, which is what we mainly use. Now, out of that water, 0.3% is in lakes and rivers, which is what is most available to locals in the least developed areas. Now, 30.8% is groundwater, whilst 68.9% is locked in glaciers that makes the water less accessible to us. This means we have to utilize our resources more efficiently as the world's population grows. Experts say that the main issue is not actually the fact that the population is growing, but that we are using our resources inefficiently. There is enough water for everyone. We have tons of rainfall, for instance, that we never utilize. We also overuse water in some regions, like in Norway. And the main trend is that agriculture uses more water than what is really necessary. So can we then say that the problem is a growing population? When Earth only housed 2 billion people, we could afford to waste water or not exploit the resources available to us. Today, we do not. This does not mean that the population is growing too large. It just means we need to be smarter. Countries like Mali, Cambodia, and Laos were formerly known as countries where water scarcity was a huge issue. Now, over the past 15 years, the countries have boosted water access by more than 30%. This shows that there are possibilities of bettering the conditions in many areas. The government in these 3 countries implemented several projects to eradicate water scarcity, and clearly many of them had the wanted effect. Very often, when water scarcity occurs, especially in the case of economic water scarcity, we see that poor governance is a factor. Bad infrastructure, poor education on hygiene, or just no working water pumps are all elements that a government could do something about. They could also create a system for pricing water in various industries or agricultural production. However, we see that many governments do not take action and that people are suffering because of it. There is wide agreement that our planet is undergoing climate change, caused by human pollution and overuse. Now, water pollution ruins the water quality, and many are exposed to diseases as a result. More extreme weather and drought are effects of climate change, and also events that enhances water scarcity. Now, previously, we saw that population growth was not as big of an issue as we often think. The growing middle class is in this case, however, a problem, if you can say it in that way, because the richest billion of us actually use 50% of all fossil fuel. Now, if we want the rest of our world's population to rise up to our own level of prosperity, this will mean an enormous growth in overuse of fossil fuels. And we are seeing, if we divide the world into millions, that every million except the richest one, is going through some kind of growth which enhances their use of fossil fuels. But who are we to say that some must live without the same benefits as we have just because we already pollute too much? The growth that they are undergoing should be applauded, even if it is causing more pollution. There are, of course, options where we can decrease the use of fossil fuels through renewable energy sources. But this is very expensive and something that Western countries aren't willing to do now, and that we probably couldn't afford during our own development in our industrial revolution. So can we then expect other developing countries to spend remarkable resources doing what many of us aren't even willing to do now that we are pretty rich? But what we do know is that if the world does not take extreme measures to lessen the pollution and drastic climate change, we will not be able to decrease water scarcity. Something needs to be done. What we have seen is that water scarcity is, and will be also in the future, a major issue. I chose this topic because I believe that strained resources in this very basic area of human life could possibly be the world's largest area of conflict in the future. Water is something we all need to survive. With a weakened quality of water or too little water, we are more vulnerable to diseases. Now, there is no life without water. Water means money, and water could be used as leverage in disputes or conflicts in the future. I especially worry that countries will go to war over this because it's such a basic human need. Now, therefore, I believe we need to make some smart and maybe tough decisions now to save ourselves from possible conflicts and a major water scarcity issue in the future. For this project, I have based numbers and facts on statistics presented by sub-organizations for the United Nations. For other articles, I've tried to focus on media that is known for fact-checking and being professional as to objectivity. A debate orchestrated by Al Jazeera was very helpful in my work, where 3 experts were brought in and had very contrasting opinions, which I believe enriched my knowledge and reflections on the issue.